We're talking about it. Mom's making it. We're talking about substance abuse recovery. We're talking about senior living, healthcare. We have a great show. I'm Angie Graham, and we're talking about it. Filming Dementia. We're talking about it today. I'm Angie Graham, and I am here with Brad Lichtenstein. Brad is an award-winning filmmaker who's been making documentaries since 1998 and founded 371 Productions in 2003. His recent film, When Claude Got Shot, premiered at the 2021 SXSW Film Festival, was featured in the May of 2022 on PBS series Independent Lens, and won the 2022 Emmy for Exceptional Merit in Documentary Filmmaking. He's been nominated for 2 Emmys, 1 Sports Emmy for the VR film Ash 68, which premiered at the Sundance in 2019, and the News and Documentary Emmy for the 2012 Independent Lens PBS film As Goes Janesville. Today, films as well as Almost Home, a cinema documentary about nursing home business in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Penelope, a documentary about dementia and wheelchair-bound people, reimagining and performing the play Odyssey by Homer. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you very much.
I am so excited to talk to you because you make films about things that I'm passionate about. To give you a little bit of background about myself, my father had Alzheimer's, and as a daughter, I went through that journey. He got diagnosed when he was 57, and I was in my 20s at the time. And so before I ever got into the industry, I went on this journey with him and slowly watched the disease rob him of his life, basically, as it does. And I got passionate about the cause and trying to sort out my own whys and why did this happen to him. He ultimately passed away when he was young, 67. And I entered this business 16 years ago because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make sense of that loss. So I really appreciate your film so much because it was so relatable to people to just watch it, and so that was really great. But before I get too far along in my own story, here, how did you get started making documentaries?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm very sorry about your father, and especially that he died so young. Excuse me. And I'm glad that the films reached you in some kind of way when you were going through that. I got started many, many years ago. I actually thought that I might go into politics, believe it or not. And so I had worked for a civil rights organization here in Atlanta, where I live now. And I had met some filmmakers, and I thought they were really cool. They were telling a story about the civil rights movement. I had worked for John Lewis, the civil rights leader, when I was in high school when he ran for Congress. And so it was a period of time that I'm very passionate about and a movement that I'm passionate about. And long story short, I ended up in this PhD program at NYU for philosophy and politics, and asking myself, what am I doing here? And I looked up the filmmakers who I had met before and asked them, hey, what does it take to be a filmmaker? And one thing led to another. They connected me with some internships in New York. And then eventually I got my first, I'd say, real job. I did all kinds of crazy jobs like cleaning film, third shift, and working as a sound person, even though I didn't know what I was doing, on a short film for HBO and all kinds of stuff. But eventually I landed at a place called Lumiere Productions, and we were doing documentaries mostly for PBS. And that's really where I think, my career kind of got started.
How many films have you made?
I don't know, man. You got to count them. A lot. A lot. We're turning one in in about a week, actually, that will air on PBS American Experience in November. So I just keep making them. I try not to stop and look back and count too much.
Well, that's awesome. And you won an Emmy for When Claude Got Shot. Can you walk us through that film, how that came about?
Sure. It's a very personal film. Claude Motley, the protagonist of the film, is one of my closest friends. I lived for 21 years in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Claude was one of the first people I ever met because our kids went to daycare together. And in 2014, he had moved away. I should say that he and his family had left Milwaukee, I think in 2008, to move down to Charlotte, North Carolina. And so they would always, when they came to town, would stay with friends and families. They always stayed with us for part of the time. So Claude was in town in 2014. He had his high school reunion. And sadly, tragically, he was dropping his friend off, and then two cars pulled up and attempted to carjack him. And he pressed the gas. And when he did that, one of the young boys, 15-year-old boy, shot into the car, and it went through his jaw. And very lucky that he escaped with his life, but a very long ordeal. He ended up recovering at our house, and just a few days into that ordeal, we talked about whether this should be a film because of what he was going through and because of issues around gun violence, all across the country. So we ended up following the story. It turned out to be 5 years of a journey, and we, tracked not just his journey, but also the journey of the young boy who shot him. And we go through the judicial system together. And eventually the two of them come together in a personal way towards the end of the film, which I don't want to give away what happens. But it's a very moving story. And, of course, just one that's really special to me because it's my friend. I was not just making the movie, but I was also taking care of him in a lot of different instances.
I watched the film, and it evoked a lot of emotion for me personally in watching it because I'm a mother. I've raised 3 sons. And so I had empathy for that young boy being 15 years old when, he went to court as an adult. I had feelings about that, but I also had feelings for Claude in this too. And it almost brought me to tears, and not to give too much away, but when he appeared in court for the sentencing. And interesting, where I'm at here in Portage, Wisconsin is right next. I can almost see the prison from here when I sit at my desk. And so I thought of that young man. I don't know if he's still there, but so that was just very interesting when I watched the film, knowing that potentially he's a quarter mile down the road from where I'm at.
Yeah, he was at that prison for a while. He ended up transferring, thankfully, closer to his mom in Milwaukee.
Okay.
But we filmed that scene just a quarter mile from you.
Yeah. Yeah. And my husband and I, we run a nonprofit, and we work with people. We have sober living. So we work with people that are entering recovery from drug use, that are trying to put their lives together after numerous convictions. Some are coming out of prison, and they're trying to re-enter society and be normal again. So there was a lot of things I could really relate in this story, and you definitely deserved that Emmy. It was just a great. Like I said, I felt a lot of different emotions in watching it, and if you haven't seen it out there, watch it. It is. I think
you deserve the Emmy for the work that you're doing. That's incredible. And there's a great podcast called Ear Hustle. I don't know if you've ever heard that. But it's hosted by a person who was in prison for a long time during the podcast. He eventually was released, and a woman who's outside, and they met through the kind of work that you're doing.
Okay. Yeah, my husband has a real passion for it. He's been in recovery 12 years. And so,
Congratulations.
he knows the life you can have, but it is a whole new way of learning. And right now we can house up to 21 individuals. We do men and women. And so while
Wow.
it is a project. We could probably have you make a film on what we do, but it is a project. There's a lot of stories. Everybody has a story, and a lot of times there's trauma behind those things. But
For
I
sure.
do believe in redemption and trying to help people. But with the justice system, it is hard for individuals coming out. They don't get any recovery in prison. And it's hard when they come out for them to get work, for them to get acceptance, so we try to bring awareness
Yeah.
to the problem. And
Wisconsin is, in particular, a state that has very few efforts towards trying to rehabilitate people. Very different than, say, California, that has lots of educational and arts programs and job training programs so that people come out with a lot more life skills. I
yes,
hope that Wisconsin will start to move towards some of those reforms.
I do as well. I do as well. So on to another one of your films, Penelope. Can you set the scene for us? Also, I watched this film. Can you set the scene for us in your own words? What is Penelope?
Sure. Can I back up a little bit, though? Because
Sure.
Penelope really comes from my wife's work. So let me
Okay.
just say a word or two, because this is really how I learned about aging and about dementia.
Okay.
My wife, Dr. Ann Basting, developed something called time slips, which is basically a methodology to use creativity and storytelling and improvisation as a way to connect with people who don't have access to memory. And it can be used in all kinds of settings, but certainly dementia, Alzheimer's is a prominent one. And so Penelope is really the story of one of her projects. She had the idea to take sort of stories that we're all familiar with, like Homer's Odyssey, come into a care setting and invite everyone, whether they are a caregiver, professional caregiver, or family member, residents at any level of ability, and staff, no matter what job they're doing, to come together to read this book, together, to read the Odyssey,
Mm-hmm.
and then to reimagine it as a performance in a way that would speak to their lives. So the way they reimagined it and what we show in the film is that people related more to Penelope than they did to Homer. Homer is off at war and Penelope is waiting, which is much more akin to the experience of a lot of people who live in a nursing home. Also,
Mm-hmm.
there are lots of women. Women live longer, as we know. And
Yes.
so identifying with Penelope was more natural to many of the people who took part in the project. And then what you see is my wife and also a theater group coming together, working with staff, working with residents across this wide spectrum to basically devise scenes and then rehearse scenes. And then sort of the climax is to turn a place like a nursing home that a lot of people are repelled by into a cultural center and invite an audience in. And they did. They sold out every performance. The scenes were performed in different parts of the nursing home and care community complex. So people moved around. And it wasn't dour or sad. It was actually very funny in a lot of different places. And then also there's incredibly moving scenes. The last scene, I will say, the person who created Wicked, the play on Broadway, saw that and just fell in love with the last scene. I think because of the way it takes, ordinary people who are put into this position to perform something that they've recreated, and sort of transforms them the way art does into artists and into people who are creating this communion with an audience I remember he said, Gregory said to me, like, that's one of the most moving things he's ever seen. So, I mean, we just filmed it, but we didn't create that. That was, of course, my wife and Maureen and the other people that she was working with.
Yeah, and when I was watching it, the struggle that we have, because we have 13 memory care locations that we run, and the struggle that we have as providers, and especially now with the staffing shortages, is really stimulating individuals in that setting and still trying to give them purpose. And what I loved about it was you could just see them light up as they were working with their crew, and you see those eyes come back alive and those wires connect, which happens with individuals with dementia, and particularly with music. And I thought, what a great idea. It left me wanting to watch the play. But what a great idea, honestly. It gave me ideas of things that we could do and do better at. And we're always learning, and we're always, our settings are smaller and more intimate. So it gives us the ability to do more.
That's awesome.
But it gave me a lot of ideas in watching that.
Yeah, I will say, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, even in small settings and even in, very rural, under-resourced places, my wife did a similar project with 8 nursing homes in Kentucky, very, very rural Appalachia. And it was really transformative. I think the magic really is that if we can shift our thinking to be away from, the travesty of the disease and much more about recognizing that people always have something to give, no matter, what state their cognition might be or their physical body might be. And then to put people in this place where we're asking for them to create in the moment, it removes all the pressure to try to remember anything, which is the disability we're talking about. And it gives them opportunity to find joy and also just to be seen differently, which is one of the most important things to combat the stigma of dementia. And frankly, old age in particular. I mean, Americans have a huge stigma around aging.
Yes, I would agree. Did your theater people, was this the first time they had worked with the advanced elderly?
Yeah, it was the first time. And I think you can see it in the film. There's a kind of learning curve that you see some of the people who are working from the theater group go through. I mean, there's a great scene where Maureen, who's kind of the lead director, is really excited about this kind of breakthrough that one of the resident actors had. And she's just thrilled, like, oh my God, he got it. And then the next day, it's gone because he has dementia. Right. And she's like, oh, right. I have to adjust. But that's kind of the point, right? Is like, let's us do the adjustment.
We teach, we do a training for our staff that work with, and that's being present in their day, where they are today. Is going to be different than where they are tomorrow, their reality. And when people first started working with individuals with dementia, they were trying to remind them that it's this year and it's this time. And you just have to step into what their reality was. And in doing that with my dad, toward the end of his disease, he thought I was his sister. And that was perfectly fine with me because he still recognized me as a loved one.
Exactly.
And so we would just enter that reality until, the heartbreaking for families that happen, and I see it happen, is when they no longer remember you. And sometimes families get criticized because they don't visit as often. But it is going through that personally, it's very painful, and you're already mourning the loss while your loved one is still here. So I remind our people not to be too judgmental because it's hard for us as loved ones to cope and deal with.
Yeah, no, your insights are really spot on. It's hard on all sides. But my mother-in-law has pretty advanced dementia. And I think she, gets that I'm familiar, especially if I am with her husband or someone else. But I think it just teaches us too about just being Zen, being in that moment, accepting what's there, and just loving a person as they are. And it's, sometimes it can be really, I don't know. I think I dare to use the word fun, but there's something to the fact that Sally, my mother-in-law, is not going to remember from moment to moment. So sometimes we kind of have fun with that. We might sing the same song over and over. She loves "You Are My Sunshine," and she's not getting bored. So it's really,
No.
it's just for us to adjust, not her, and just to find the joy in all of it.
Was it difficult for the performers to understand the project initially, or how did they adapt to it? We're Talking About It is brought to you by Our House Senior Living. Visit us at ourhouseseniorliving.com.
I mean, it was difficult. I don't think difficult's the right word, because everybody really in that group, came with really open minds and open hearts, and so much of acting is about trying to understand other people's worlds, trying to understand other people's experiences. So I think they just took a lot of their actor training and their actor instincts and applied it to a situation that maybe they were less familiar with. I mean, also, they did another project altogether, which was called, oh my gosh, what was it called? I'm blanking on the name of it at the moment, but they created what they called creative house calls. This was another brainchild from my brilliant wife. And there's a scene that we filmed for filming it, with a house call with a man who had pretty advanced dementia. He didn't really understand his relationship to anyone else, but he loved driftwood. He loved to collect it. And they, meaning part of the theater group, James in particular, my wife and he, and this man's caregiver, partner, were in the backyard with the driftwood, and they created a dance that's just gorgeous with the driftwood. It sounds kind of absurdist, which in a way makes it fun. But that was a way that they discovered that the man with dementia, really liked to communicate, was with movement. And you could see that it was very satisfying or calming to him. So it just became a thing that they did together.
Yeah, everyone's journey in dementia is different, and finding your way of communication is a path that they, that as caregivers or as family members, you try to connect to and try to find out what is going to be their best method of communication. Sometimes, I walk into a memory care and a nonverbal resident will just grab my hand and want to sit with me. And so it is trying to connect with them. She wants to say something somehow, and it's trying to figure out what that is. So that's amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, when we made Almost Home, we basically camped out at the nursing home at St. John's for almost a year. So we have lots of stories like that of just connecting in the moment with people.
And you learn to love them. There's something to me very endearing. When my father went into memory care, I didn't grow up with grandparents. So I was a bit afraid of the elderly because he was young yet going in. And and I was in my 20s, and you're going into a memory care with a bunch of individuals with dementia. And I was just uncomfortable because I hadn't had this exposure, had this experience before. And as the weeks and the months and eventually years went by, you learn to love everyone there. It's just a whole different reality. You walk into their space, and it's whatever their place and time is. That's where you are, and that's who you're visiting. And I love going out and seeing our residents, our memory care residents, and seeing how. Seeing where they are in their space. As the premiere date got closer for the play, did you see changes as you're working with individuals with dementia? Did you see a change in them?
It sort of depended on the person. I don't know that I saw marked changes. I mean, that was one of the things, is that people who were pretty advanced, they weren't tracking day to day, or there wasn't kind of like an arc of, they weren't being asked to memorize lines. So it wasn't like you could track that kind of thing. In many cases, people's participation was not about, a script at all. So I think what I observed had more to do just with, in those moments, you could tell that people were engaged, they were having a good time, whatever kinds of malaise or maybe even just pain that was sometimes part of their day was often not there, most of the time not there. So those were the kinds of things I noticed, but maybe not like an arc or progressions per se.
Did you notice any individuals with dementia that may have been confused by what was going on?
Oh, sure. I mean, the methodology that was developed by that team really was about, reorienting everyone to what the activity was every time, right? You can't just walk into a rehearsal and go, okay, let's pick up where we left off. We're on page 64, line 5,
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely true. When you got all done and you got through these performances, how did it change the perspective of your performers that got to work with these individuals? What long-lasting impact did you see that it made with people, with your performers?
Yeah, you mean like with the theater group?
Right, with the theater group.
I mean, I think one of the stories I could tell is that Maureen, who, as I mentioned, is kind of the main director. It's a very collective group, but she's sort of the main director. She really went on to engage with this issue around aging in subsequent work. In fact, she ended up working with a woman who sadly just passed away. She was 93, I think. But she had been at one point, very long, wonderful life. She had been the chair of the drama department at Yale. She had written many books. She had written plays. And she was a mentor to my wife, to Anne. She became the subject of one of Maureen's short films, actually. So, Maureen went on to really engage with this issue around aging and other aspects of I think, particularly with women in her career. And I think, a lot of the other performers, I mean, Rebecca, James, I think they've always kind of been interested in working with older communities as part of their practice. So they came with a lot of sensitivity already.
Yeah. So
I think, the change that was really notable, even more than, say, the theater group, is staff. Because a lot of staff, I think, for whatever reason, can become complacent. Or sometimes staff, if they have, say, a janitorial job, or even CNAs, don't feel very valued by the organizations they work for. And this, because it created this sort of even playing field, and gave everybody an opportunity to engage creatively, it really formed, I think, different kinds of relationships between staff and residents, and even like staff and management. And it also, I think, gave people this opportunity to discover new parts of themselves, which they could then bring into their work. Of course, it's up to the institution whether to, sort of take those different lessons and learnings from the project and apply them into their practice or not.
I love that. So we got to get into Almost Home. And
Sure.
This was a favorite of mine as well. Loved it. But again, in your words, walk us through, for those who have not watched it. And if you have not watched it and you work in the assisted living or nursing home healthcare field, please watch this.
Thank you.
What was this project's goal, and how did you find your way into this project?
Well, so to answer the last one first, I mean, the way I found my way into it was really through my wife. That project came about because we had just moved from New York to Milwaukee for my wife's job, actually. And she, had been engaged in creativity and aging, and a foundation that was supporting her work offered support for a film about this kind of work. And so that was really kind of the origin. I mean, to be honest, I didn't think I was going to be doing a film about aging when I moved from New York to Milwaukee, but there was an opportunity. And so I dove in. That film, it really, the first thing we did was my co-producer, Lisa Gildahouse, and I went to go visit a lot of nursing homes. And our goal was to really tell the story of a place that was trying to do better, trying to be more humane, trying to recognize residents, as people and not as patients, and, part of this movement towards culture change. So we went out, we interviewed, we observed. I think we probably went to maybe 10 or 11 different care communities. And, we landed on St. John's, partially because they were taking culture change seriously and they were at an early part in this journey to apply culture change. So we knew we could see something. And then, frankly, their director was really open to cameras. I mean, she was advised every which way to Tuesday not to let us in, and by her lawyers. And she said famously to me, lawyers are there to give advice, but they don't tell you what to do. So she ended up saying yes, because she thought the story was important. And to this day, I still, we're still in touch. Same with a lot of people from the film. And I think, it's become this kind of tool that a lot of the caregiving community has used over the years. And it's kind of surprising because, I mean, I don't know what your observation is, but my observation is that the efforts towards culture change have kind of backslid in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years or something. Maybe it has to do with staffing shortages. Maybe it has to do with, the rising cost of healthcare. But for whatever reason, I definitely don't see as much effort as, and maybe I'm paying attention less. I don't know. But I can say that, like, for instance, at St. John's, a lot of the things that were being pursued have sort of been abandoned over the years, which is too bad. But it was really amazing what they were trying to do. And when you see the film, I mean, the way we tell the story, it's very character driven. So we're following several people who live there and their families. And we're also following the very passionate nursing home director who is trying to implement these changes, even though sometimes they run into obstacles, whether it's regulation hasn't caught up to allow for some of the things that they want to do to improve people's lives, or the institution itself is just having trouble kind of shifting its culture and focus. You sort of follow some of those tensions as well in the film.
Yeah, within our organization, we are very transparent on Facebook. We do videos. Right now we got a project, and we call it the Legacy Project. And what we're doing is we are doing short videos of residents asking them what they want their legacy to be. and what is something that they want to do yet in life that they may not have done yet. And then we try to make those things happen for them.
That's awesome.
And when the pandemic hit, we took a position of families weren't able to connect with their loved ones during this time. It was really a heart-wrenching time for us when we're caring for their loved ones. And then, we had to just follow what the state was mandating to maintain your license, like it or not, or, even with all of the moral issues that go along with it. My mother lives in one of our buildings, so not being able to go visit her just seemed crazy at that time. And we decided that we were going to become a lot more transparent on Facebook. And we used that as an avenue so that they could see their loved one engaging in activities and meals and then that has grown for us. We now run 25, I believe around 25 Facebook pages for each individual location. We have 28 in Wisconsin. And so we're embracing being more visible. And during that time, people love the good news stories. They love seeing people, hey, we're doing well. Those messages, they wanted to see that. And so we've continued with it. And our attorney, she might get a little nervous about some of that because the reality is there's always ambulance chasers. They're always looking for, assisted living or nursing home to do something wrong and start a lawsuit. I just felt regardless they're going to do that. And we shouldn't have to, hide our people because we do so many good things every day that people need to see that. And it far outweighs the bad, and there's bad things that happen in the industry, but there's far more good things. And one way that I really believed that we can make a difference is being transparent. We don't have anything to hide. We're doing a good job every day, and we're making residents happy every day. And so we do our director spotlights, caregiver spotlights, resident spotlights, and we're just going to continue with this messaging. And so we've been at it now since 2022, and we really launched it, which is why I wanted to talk to you and about filming people with dementia and learning so that individuals can be celebrated no matter their stage in life. Everybody has a story to tell. And one of our stories was a resident, and she wanted to do a food drive. She wanted that to be her legacy, was to do a food drive. And the community just loved it and came together and got behind her. And she then went to the food pantry to see all the food that was donated in her name. And to have that kind of purpose and impact in those chapters of their life, that they can still make a difference. I just want to see more of that and be a part of more of that for our seniors as they are aging. So, I agree with you. I think that as an industry, we're afraid of what could be on camera. But the reality is most of our facilities now have cameras in them. So if and it's capturing things. They just, I understand the risks that go along with it, but I think that there's far more good things and good stories to be told than to be afraid.
Kudos to you. I mean, so many people have a hard time trying to balance the risk with all of the reward of trying to make people's lives better. And it's just bizarre to me that people would suddenly go from just being mom or dad or whomever to being patients in a system where suddenly we operate with this abundance of caution, as if, people sometimes get hurt in everyday life, and you don't need to err so much that you've sanitized the experience to really nothing except for the bare basics that make sure that you never get hurt, you never cut yourself, you never get sick, or whatever it might be. And this, I'm sure, and your listeners probably do too. But social isolation is the equivalent. I mean, severe isolation, a stat says, is the equivalent of smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Yes.
So the interaction is so essential to human thriving, whether we have memory or not. And so much of that is like what you're doing, like these ideas of fulfilling people's fantasies of what they want to do. It's just beautiful.
Yes. And it is super fun for us too. That is the fun part of what we get to do, is trying to make the best of the situation that our residents are in. And they have so much. They have a wealth of knowledge. They have so many short stories to tell. They've lived these whole big lives, and it's really interesting to talk with them. I mean, we had a woman that was on the cover of Vogue magazine in 1955 and was in acting class with Marilyn Monroe. They've had these big lives, and the author of Where the Red Fern Grows, they lived with us. And so you never know the story that's there, but if you don't take the time to ask what their life has been and give them the joy of being able to share that, and it changes your caregivers. It changes the experience that they have with us. And something that I'm really passionate about. And thus I'm out here now, we're going to launch this podcast, and we're talking about real topics that probably other places are afraid to have conversations about.
Right.
But we want to bring awareness to it as well. Was it different? So with memory care, I know that residents sometimes sundown, and they can be more difficult to get to in the afternoon. And I noticed you guys were filming a lot in the morning. Was that a strategy that you had, or did you film all day in memory care? How did that look to you as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, we actually filmed at all different times. I think it's probably hard to tell what time of day it is because mostly we're in hallways and there's not natural light that's visible.
Right.
But to your point, there were definitely different people who tended to, have sort of, I guess, more presence in the morning or in the evening. One of the main people in the film, Lloyd Harold, he definitely sundowned. He has had advanced Parkinson's, and the symptoms would sort of show up in a more acute way in the evenings. So there's an interview with him that's done in the hallway that took place, I think, at 4 a.m, maybe 3:30 in the morning. Someday he was a very early riser, and his brain was just kind of more electric early,
Yes.
and we really wanted to sort of let him. I mean, one of the things I try to do in most of my films that are this kind of film, cinema verite, where we're following people, and they're very character driven. I want them to tell their own stories. So in that case, for Lloyd, I was really interested in his point of view, kind of through the miasma of the cognitive part of Parkinson's.
Yes.
And to, hear what he's seeing and thinking from his own point of view. And there's a scene in there where we kind of intercut between this interview and this scene with the social worker, where he's trying to communicate something that's bothering him about living there. And he's not very successful at finding the words. And so we intercut that with him telling us about what the experience is to try to find the words. And I think, that scene is not so much about will his complaint come through or not. It's really about a person giving you, the audience, an insight into the experience of this disease, and thereby seeing him as a much kind of fuller human than maybe what we see if we're just seeing a person who's stammering through a series of sentences, and we don't get the chance to really hear what's going on in their brain.
When we're doing our legacy videos, you're always looking for that window of opportunity, or as we are working with the management at whatever particular location, and they have someone that they're working with that they want to get the legacy video. And it is, there's good days and there's bad days. There's mornings or there's time frames, and it's trying to work within that. work within the disease so that
Right.
you can talk with them and that they can convey that information. So I was curious if you encountered some of those same things with making the film. I just thought you would have had to.
Yeah.
In
Well,
working with people.
And Lloyd was a really, vivid kind of example of that. I mean, other people, I don't like, for instance, in the legacy video, I think they would have a hard time because I don't think that they had access to enough memory to necessarily be able to convey, something that they had done or something that they would like to do. I mean, there's another scene in Almost Home. It's a very short scene of a woman who has pretty severe dementia. She really doesn't quite know where she is. She's gets agitated at one point because she feels like she needs to be somewhere, but she doesn't know where that would be. But then she plays piano gorgeously. And then as soon as she's done, she tells us she has no idea how to play piano. The way I look at it is like the brain is just fascinating. And if you can be open to what comes out, it's like later in my life, because I made that film kind of a long time ago, I was a much more kind of harried, sleepless person. And I started meditating maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I find that some of the things I learned about patience and time at the nursing home have come back to be sort of techniques in applying, a meditation type. I don't want to get too woo-woo, but, applying meditation to your daily life. It's really about kind of breathing and being patient and seeing what is to come and not trying to control things. And that was kind of our MO. I mean, we would camp out for 12 hours and maybe only film for 1 hour because maybe not that much was happening all day. But this, when you closely observe, this one thing that was kind of relevant to the story would pop up and we'd be there for it.
It's interesting that all these years later, you said it was a long time ago, you still take some of those lessons from being in the nursing home and apply them to your life. I think that's commendable. That is awesome.
Oh, thank you. I'm also married to an expert, so.
I go home and talk about work all the time. So my husband says to me, he feels like he works there too. He knows all the characters and what's going on. And for sure. So that's great. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you, and your films are touching in ways to me, particularly going in and capturing that stuff. It's near and dear to my heart, and so I really appreciate the work that you've done. You all can find 371 Production Films at 371productions.com, and where you can watch or procure Brad's films through the website. Brad, what does the future hold for you? What do you look forward to? You said you're about to release another film. Can you give us any little clue as to the content of your new film?
Oh yeah. No, I can just tell you about it.
Awesome.
It's going to be on television November 12th on American Experience, which is the history show that's on PBS. And I'm co-directing it with Yoruba Richin, who I've co-directed with before. And we tell the story of the only successful coup in American history, which occurred back in 1898 in North Carolina when white supremacists, who were the Democratic Party at the time, they attempted and succeeded in overthrowing a multiracial government in Wilmington, North Carolina. And subsequently, there was a massacre, and also lots and lots of Black families were banished from Wilmington. And North Carolina it was effective. I mean, North Carolina did not elect another Black leader to statewide office until 1993. So almost 100 years after this coup. And I dare say it resonates with some of the things that we're seeing in political arenas right now, particularly the vilification of, people who some don't like by saying that they commit crimes and lying about their, characteristics. That I'm trying to be diplomatic, but this playbook has been around in American life since the beginning, and so it's a film that really delves into that story, and also the way in which the story was buried intentionally for almost 100 years. The last thing I'll say is that it's not straight up history. We also tell the story through the words of the descendants of both the white perpetrators and the Black victims and families that were impacted by the events of 1898. So coming to PBS, November 12th.
Well, I can't wait to see it, and I'm sure it will be something to see.
It will be something to see.
Filming Dementia, we talked about it today. I'm Angie Graham, and with me is Brad Lichtenstein. And thank you for being with me today, Brad. It was so nice to get to know you. And I'm looking forward to seeing your new film.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you and appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you. You can find the We're Talking About It podcast on YouTube, YouTube Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.